While the top of the 2025 draft was super predictable coming in, the night delivered some of the biggest surprises we've seen in the class in recent memory, with the Nets having a very interesting draft strategy, Hansen Young finding his way into the middle of the first round, and the Pelicans picking up a second lottery pick, among many other events. I know a lot of you want to hear my opinion on everything that happened, so we'll just roll through everything in order and talk some of the biggest winners and more confusing picks in the process. Now, Cooper Flagg was obviously the number one pick in the draft. We all knew this was happening for months, so I don't really have too much else to say here that isn't just replaying the same things over and over. So Mavs fans, don't take it as a slight or anything. You guys should know who you got. Now, the same thing can be said here with Dylan Harper at number 2. It was pretty much expected that that's what they were going to do if they didn't trade the pick or go star hunting. And I think Harper's ability to make plays, create advantages, and also play in more than one spot will be felt pretty strongly here. So I'm pretty excited to see that and how all these pieces around Wemby start to take shape this next season. Now, with those first 2 picks out of the way, the draft basically started with Philly having a 3rd pick. Whether that meant for legitimate trade opportunities or just more debate in who actually to pick in this spot, but the Sixers went with VJ Edgecombe. VJ's combination of athleticism, defensive playmaking, and what's both a complementary game offensively and what I believe to be high potential was bound to attract teams at the top of the draft, and he did just that. Now, Philly is in an interesting spot overall. I'm curious to see what their rotations look like early, just with all of Maxey, McCain, VJ, Grimes all there in the backcourt. Also on a team that's led by Embiid and PG too, but that is a good problem to have. I think VJ is going to impact winning one way or another, and health willing, Philly will do a good deal of that in next year's East. Now, Charlotte took Con Knipple at number 4. Con is about as solid a prospect as there is in this class to me. You can debate his upside, but he's going to shoot, he's going to make good decisions, he competes and has pretty good size. I like the fit next to LaMelo and Brandon Miller offensively. I think they'll have a chance to put together some really impressive stretches, and getting him in situations where he can play off of shifted defenses and be a second side creator is going to be good for him. Now, defensively, for this team as a whole, really is a completely different conversation, especially with those 3 out there. But I definitely preferred Con here at 4 with no VJ on the board, just as a steadying presence, other than maybe a trade back option for somebody like CMB or, you know, maybe even Malawach, considering they did ultimately get rid of Mark Williams. But Con went to the Hornets at number 4. Now, there was a lot of talk around Ace Bailey in his camp seemingly trying to force himself to a situation, and one that probably wasn't Utah based on his reaction and answering the question with this.
Had you had any idea they had any interest in you?
No idea.
But that's what it ended up being. Now, like I said on the last board, I like Ace's upside and think he was still worth considering at this point as a wing shot maker who has legitimate upside defensively. I am pretty curious to see where Utah goes from here with some of the trades of their veterans and how some of their guys develop, like an Isaiah Collier, Keontae George, Kyle Filipowski, and others, because right now there's just a whole lot of stuff, obviously. But from a talent perspective, I like the pick, and hopefully they can get some buy-in out of him and what will assuredly be a good amount of minutes and responsibility early. Trey Johnson was the pick for the Wizards at number 6, and at this point we're 6 for 6 just going off of my board ranking. I thought that they might go with Fears here. I've been on the record for liking Derek Queen in DC a lot, though that is a little high for most people's taste, I would guess. But Trey's elite shooting, his perimeter self-creation, and passing upside as a 6'6 guard definitely have a lot of appeal. I think there could be some overlap there with Bub, especially because both of them aren't known for getting paint touches or going to the bucket, and with Sarr in the middle and not being a huge advantage creator as a screener right now, I would wonder how much they help each other out there. But this is year 2 of the rebuild. I don't think you can go wrong with getting talent, so I think this was a fine pick. Jeremiah Fears went to New Orleans at 7. I initially questioned New Orleans' direction after their picks and some of the trades that they made, which we'll get to, but you know, I actually think they're in a solid spot. I've been a little unsure on Fears throughout the draft, but I feel like he's got about as much creation upside as anyone in the class and would make for a good swing pick for a couple teams in the top 10, and that's what we've got here. Now, it might be rough at first unless he can fast track his development as a shooter. That would be my concern in the short term, especially if this team is in playoff contention. Knowing they just brought in Jordan Poole and you've got DeJounte Murray there, along with a bunch of other guys who, when healthy, are very good players. But considering that he should be going into college this next year, I think you have the patience to work with him. So a lot of other directions they could have gone in, but I don't mind getting the talent. Now, Yegor Dimon going 8th to Brooklyn was a very big surprise to me and probably the biggest one of the night at this point. I felt like Brooklyn was one of his main landing spots, or his best landing spots, just because of the amount of picks that they had, but 8th is just entirely too high for me. He's a fun passer, he's huge, he's got fluid mechanics as a shooter. I just think for the 8th pick, you're hoping that he's an actual point guard or lead playmaker, and to me, a lot has to happen for that. Now, maybe he has really been shooting the cover off in workouts. Maybe that swayed Brooklyn enough that they think it works, but this was the first selection in what became a fascinating night for them. Now, Toronto taking Colin Murray-Boyles at 9 was intriguing. He's easily one of the best defenders in the class, if not the best. He's a great passer and a physical force as a scorer, so there is a lot to like there. They're another team that just has a lot going on, so I can't fully judge the situation until they presumably make a move or two. So I think it might be a little weird offensively at first, as long as he still can't shoot it, but he's super talented, he's productive, and he has a reason to play early on. Now, Toronto could have gone with Malawach there. I think that would have been a great pick as well, but he went 10th to Phoenix, which I love. They just got rid of KD and got a bit of a weird return, but getting someone with that 10th pick who I think can be a starting center in the league for a very long time is excellent. But as they made this pick, they also traded a 2029 first round pick and the 29th pick in this draft for Mark Williams, who I also like when he's healthy, and actually compared Malawach to him, but he hasn't been healthy, and giving up that much just to have what you kind of hope is a bridge player for Malawach to develop is kind of a head scratcher. Now, we're obviously early in the offseason, so there's more to come, but I feel like they could have done more with those assets. But that aside, Malawach in Phoenix is something that I really like otherwise. We got another interesting trade here at 11. Portland originally had this one, but Memphis traded 16, a 2028 first from Orlando, and 2 seconds to get Washington State wing Cedric Howard, who we can assume that they loved. I like Cedric a lot in Memphis. I think his tools as a defender, shooter, and just overall complimentary player are there, and he might just have the ability to exceed expectations with his approach and sort of a weird path to this point. Now, I initially felt like it was probably a slight overpay. I imagine they were in competition with a team or two to trade up here, but even doing this right now and talking about it, I don't mind it, but he does have a few more expectations on him now than he ever had, being the sort of D3 underdog. So that'll be a new thing for him. Now, Noah Asinghe went to Chicago at 12, and I like Asinghe here. He's definitely a project, and I've thought to myself, like, best case scenario, he and Modest are probably both 4s, right? At least optimally, but they are young and versatile enough to be worth just figuring it out and acquiring talent. I would understand a Bulls fan being a little wary or skeptical of this pick, especially if you don't know much about him or haven't seen him play much. He is a long-term play, and I'm not sure who they're currently investing into on this team, but he definitely has the upside to exceed his draft spot here. He's the second youngest player in the draft. He's got a lot of tools, and he's not really like anybody that they've picked in the last several years. New Orleans traded back into the lottery at 13 to get Maryland big man Derek Queen. And like I said earlier, I was initially a little confused, but from a talent perspective, I do like it. They probably have the same issue they've had in the past in having too many guys and not enough roles and minutes, but Derek's playmaking, his unique skill set, and touch around the rim could be very interesting here. And maybe that signals that they could move on from Zion in the near future. Not because they play the same position or are the same caliber of player, but just structurally how that might work. Now, as much as I like Derek, they probably gave up too much here. The 23rd pick is whatever, but that 2026 unprotected first could end up super valuable in a class that has some true blue chippers at the top, but they believe enough in DQ and hopefully will set him up for success. And then at the end of the lottery, Carter Bryant was still sitting there for San Antonio, and that's who they ended up taking. I'm pretty high on his defense on the wing. I think he can be one of the best in the class there, and he's also a capable shooter and makes high field plays off the ball. So that's exactly what I think they should be looking to fill out this roster with around Wemby and however this backcourt shakes out. But yeah, I really like the night that San Antonio had getting Harper and Bryant, and they get the stamp as one of the overall winners of the night for me. Now, Thomas Sorber was a pick for the champion OKC Thunder at 15, and I can't say I love the fit much more than that one. He's a 6'10 big with a 7'5 wingspan. He's got terrific defensive feel, can pass it at a high level, and has some skills as an interior scorer. And that's exactly what they could use in the long term in this second apron contract era. And I also think having someone like Chip England there to help develop him as a shooter could turn him into an even better player than is expected. So This was another one of my favorite picks of the night, and I'd consider OKC a winner because of it. But this was one of the more unexpected moments of the entire night. Portland did good work picking up some extra assets to move back 5 spots in a class that, to me, started to get progressively flatter at this point, and knowing the bodies that they already have, I love that part of it. But they took Hansen Young at 16. Now, talent-wise, I think Young is really interesting, and I already felt like I'd end up a little too low on him just because of some of the defense and playing in the CBA, but the offensive skill set is definitely there for a 7-2 guy. Now, my question would be first, because there's no world where he and Klingon can play together, it is an interesting vision. Maybe they think that he could be a star, and to that point, you absolutely go for it and figure it out later, like a Jokic and Nurkic remix, because you're not good enough right now to count on anything, but that's the part I find to be probably most interesting out of this. And then in the short term, they do have Ayton and Rob Williams and probably look to be competitive given they already overachieved last year and just traded for Drew Holiday, but that's a little bit of a lower concern. To be honest, I kind of love the swing. I wouldn't have done it, but I'm definitely excited to see how things transpire given the confidence that they clearly have in him. We've got another international big man getting taken off the board here in Johan Berenger, who went to Minnesota at 17, and I like this pick quite a bit. He's definitely someone that you're not expecting much from in the first couple years of his career, but the size, the athleticism, and defensive potential is definitely there, and getting to learn from a fellow Frenchman in Rudy Gobert, I think it could be an excellent spot for him. Minnesota gets a long-term shot at replacing Rudy, who is on the older side too, so while they probably could have got someone that makes more of an impact sooner, I think you can convince yourself of this move too. The Wizards traded 18 for 21, 40, and 43 from the Jazz, and the Jazz went with Walter Clayton Jr. I think he probably ends up the best guard on this Jazz team early on. There's some definite differences in style between all of them, especially him and Collier and what they bring to the table, but he's a dynamic shot maker who we've seen do it on the biggest stages and should get the reps to work through some things as a passer, especially given he can attract so much attention with the pull-up. But yeah, I think this would be good value for anyone, but especially a Utah that just kind of needs good basketball players. Now, the Nets are back up at 19 here, and this is where you could tell they might have a little different strategy than we all assume. They took French guard Nolan Traore. And I think this is fine value for Nolan. You can talk yourself into his priors and upside as a playmaker pretty quickly, even with the efficiency issues and some of the ups and downs that he had. But when you take Yegor at 8, I do assume that you believe he can become one of your lead playmakers, which then makes this more questionable. But you do get 2 cracks at a lead playmaker, and I'm not mad at that at this point, though. There were obviously some other options. Another winner of the night to me was Miami taking Kaspers Jakubonis at 20. As much as I liked him, I wasn't actually all that surprised by his fall. We talked about some of his issues with the turnovers and the athleticism, but I still think his size, shot making upside, and passing was enough to consider as high as the lotto because it's just not all that easy to find. But I really like the value here for a Miami team that could use the talent boost and youth. And a team that was overtaxing both Bam and Tyler Hero as creators, KJ should help even if it is in like more of a bench role. Now, Will Riley went to the Wizards at 21. If there's any team that has the developmental reps and runway to take on the type of guys like Will Riley and Keyshawn George, it's definitely the Wizards. Now, he, along with the rest of this roster, is built like me out there, so I appreciate the dedication to that. Shout out to them, and their strength and conditioning coach might need a little bit of a raise, but yeah, some real upside in another big shot maker that could be a part of an eventual unique wing group down the line. The Nets were up again at 22 and they took UNC wing Drake Powell. I didn't mind this pick either. He was well in that first round mix in that tier for me, so a team like the Nets with a little more opportunity early on makes sense for a wing defender as impressive as him and someone with his priors as a shot maker. And this was probably my favorite pick of the night from them. Now, the Hawks got their guy in Asa Newell at 23. I ended up a little lower on Asa than I was before, and I probably would have taken a couple others, but this was perfectly fine value at this point of the draft, especially getting all those extra picks in the process. And when you look at their front court rotation of Okongwu, Porzingis, Gay, Jalen Johnson, and Newell, that's a pretty nice group to work with. The Sacramento swooped in to get Nick Clifford at 24. He is an older player, but his ability to impact all parts of the game and also fit in a number of spots is very intriguing, and just giving up what will probably be a late first from San Antonio in 2027 is fine value in my book. The Kings don't have a ton of direction right now, but you can't go wrong getting a good basketball player like Nick here, and that'll at least help give them some structure when they hopefully do transition out of this kind of halfway point that they're in. Now, another one of my winners of the draft was Jace Richardson. He ended up in Orlando at 25, and his fit there as a smaller guard who not only gets to play with bigger creators like Paolo and Franz, but also point of attack defenders like Jalen Suggs and Anthony Black, I'll throw Bane in there too, is the ideal context for him to exceed expectations. Now, there's still going to be some questions in what he can actually do with the ball and how effective he is being their backup point guard, but I like this a lot for both sides and think he's a good enough basketball player to contribute in year one on a pretty good team. Now, back to this Brooklyn Nets show. They took Ben Saroff and Danny Wolf, officially using all 5 of their first round picks. All the guys that they took are interesting individually and were in the first round range for a reason, but when I'm thinking about team building, all of them besides Powell need the ball to maximize their own game, and on a team that will likely still keep a Cam Thomas on it, I just struggle to see how the reps are going to be there to find out who everyone is and still create a team that looks like an NBA team. Now looking at things positively here for a second, it's clear their strategy is to get as many playmakers as possible and teach them to shoot and play more within flow. And with this, you give yourself multiple chances at least one of them hitting if that's what you really wanted from this draft. Now, if you're going to do that, I say just invest in the guys that you really like, even if it is Yegor at 8 and you take one of Saroff or Traore, and then you fill it out with those who have more malleability and other useful skill sets. But I am skeptical of this process here. Maybe if Saroff gets stashed, you could convince me more, but I am curious to see how it plays out because it could be an opportunity to learn. Now, the Celtics picked up Hugo Gonzalez here at 28. I definitely like the value, particularly because of the situation that Boston is in next year. Hugo has been a pro. He's got a ton of energy. He fits in well. I think he could be a very nice complement and grow from there in the future, especially if he can get there as a shooter. And given the situation he was in this year playing with Real Madrid, there is a chance that he was a bit undervalued for it. McNeely ended up falling quite a bit down here from where he was often projected, but he ended up in Charlotte. I do like the idea of having another big shooter in this mix. I probably would have went more defense here, whether that be a Kalkbrenner, a Thero, or a Rasheer Fleming, all of which didn't make it in the first round, but McNeely has pretty clear appeal, and you hope that he can recover some of what he'd shown pre-UConn. And the last pick in the draft gave us another surprise with the Clippers taking Yannick Conan Niederhauser. I like him. He was a late riser as an athletic big who looks the part as a rim runner and shot blocker. He is a little rough around the edges for someone that is 22, but he feels a need for them, and if he's up to speed, he'll probably make them better immediately, considering they had basically nothing behind Zubac last year. But that was the end of the first round. Recapping some of the winners of the night, I really liked what San Antonio did in getting Dylan Harper and Carter Bryant. Obviously, just winning the lottery at number 2 isn't that difficult of a pick, but I like the value in getting Carter Bryant at 14. I also like Yakuchonis at 20 from Miami. I think that's a really good spot for him. The Hawks definitely had a great night in getting their guy in Asa, and more importantly to me, picking up a bunch of assets in the process. I think both Jace Richardson and the Magic were winners. The Magic getting somebody that they would have considered at 16 pre-Bane trade, and also Jace Richardson getting into a context that makes perfect sense for him. I think that pairing is a match made in heaven. And then you've also got an OKC getting Thomas Sorber at 15. I love that fit for both sides too, and think he makes a real impact there. Other than that, I thought it was a really weird night between the trades and the less clear paths to success on some of these teams. Now, talent trumps all, and I try to remind myself that it doesn't have to be, cookie cutter or picture perfect immediately, but things definitely took shape in a way that I wouldn't have imagined that they would. The second round still has plenty of value in those first few picks. Look for guys like Noah Pinda, Rasheer Fleming, Ryan Kalkbrenner, Adu Thero, Cam Jones, and Maxime Reynaud to be some of the first names off the board. And with a team like Charlotte having 2 picks here, Boston having some contract consideration to do, and possibly Brooklyn not looking to bring in a 6th rookie, we could definitely see some more movement there early. But yeah, be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you are new around here, and leave a comment down below on who you were most surprised by and who your favorite pick of the night was. As always, I'm Keandre, this is HoopIntellect. Until next time, I'm out.